ever there was a place you could call paradise, it's here. Set in Southeast Asia at the convergence of the Pacific and Indian Oceans, it's called the Coral Triangle. And it's the Eden of oceans. The gene pool of much of the world's tropical marine life. Yet we know very little about it. The Coral Triangle is born of tectonic range. From the peak of the volcano to the bottom of the sea, it's a dynamic crucible of geoevolution. Already, scientists have recorded 3/4 of the world's known coral species and well over 2,000 different reef fish here. The nations of the Coral Triangle contain over 360 million people living on many thousands of islands, most of whom depend on the sea for their survival. But how did the Coral Triangle come to be? We are sailing into the heart of this newly identified wonder of the natural world to explore the most diverse marine environment on Earth and to discover why it holds the key to the future of much of the world's ocean life. East of Bali, off the coast of Flores, we begin our voyage. Our vessel is modelled on a classic Indonesian wooden ship, the Bugis Prau. But it's equipped with state-of-the-art diving technology. Our voyage will take us through Indonesia to Malaysia and the Philippines. We will discover how the Coral Triangle was created, how the ocean currents feed it, the amazing variety of marine life, and the challenging future of the people who live in paradise. The Coral Triangle was identified only recently as the world's epicenter of tropical marine diversity. Over the last 20 years, scientists have assembled a map of concentrations of coral reef life. They call them hotspots. What emerged is a picture of a cradle of marine life covering 6 million square kilometres and embracing 6 countries: Malaysia, the Philippines, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Timor-Leste, and the Solomon Islands. They named it the Coral Triangle. How did it become such a rich reserve of marine life? Is it in fact the mother of all tropical reefs, as some scientists believe, populating the rest with its progeny? The Bishop Museum of the University of Hawaii has sent a team of deep diving scientists to get to the bottom of the mystery of why the Coral Triangle is so prolific. They are led by ichthyologist Dr. Richard Pyle.
Most of our deep diving so far before this trip has been in the Pacific, where you might find maybe 500 species of coral reef fishes up shallow. Here in the Coral Triangle, it's more like 2,500 species, 5 times as many species. So because this is our first time ever to dive deep in the Coral Triangle region, we're excited to see, are there going to be 5 times as many deep reef fishes?
The deep divers follow the volcanic slopes down to the zone where the sunlight never reaches. They begin their search for new species of reef fish, which may reveal what is different about the Coral Triangle. Also on this voyage is legendary undersea explorer Valerie Taylor, who has seen many changes in the Coral Triangle over the last 40 years.
Hello, Auntie. Come on up here.
Hello, little Nick.
Yeah, come up here and give me a hug. There we go.
I nearly fell in.
Oh, good to see you, good to see you.
Valerie's nephew, Mark Hayes, is the skipper of the Seven Seas, and his younger brother, Jono, is a cameraman.
Come on up aboard. Come and have a drink.
Half a century ago, Valerie Taylor and her husband, Ron, began making underwater films. They became famous for diving with great white sharks and filmed the undersea sequences for Jaws. It was people's reactions to Jaws that saw the Taylors become world leaders in shark conservation. Even after 40 years of diving in the Coral Triangle, there is much to be discovered. And Valerie wants to explore its extraordinary treasures with local marine biologist Naneng Setiasi.
My dad is a professor for art and culture. When I was in high school and asked, Dad, what should I be? And my dad said something like, Indonesia is the big islands country in the world. Count how many people thinking and managing the sea. And that's actually when I decided I want to work on marine because nobody doing it in Indonesia. Oh my God, I want to cry.
Oh, don't cry.
I'm so proud of it.
The history of the Coral Triangle began 23 million years ago as the continent of Australia began to collide with Asia. Tens of thousands of islands in 6 million square kilometres of the Coral Triangle were thrust up from the barren seafloor by the volcanoes. Nobody knows the power of this region as well as Lawrence Blair. He's lived in Indonesia for 30 years and travelled the Ring of Fire as an anthropologist.
Indonesia is one of the most eruptive nations on Earth, with some 34% of the world's active volcanoes. This is Kumba here. It's one of a whole arc of volcanoes that circle around beneath us here, some 30 other volcanoes in the local neighbourhood, which mirror the arc of impact deep beneath us. Well, this is about as close as you want to get. In fact, it's a little closer than you really want to get to an erupting volcano, even though it's only going off periodically, but not reliably. You see, you've got this pumice ash. But it's certainly worth being this close every so often. Well, these red-hot stones are crashing into the water, and you realize really how small we are compared with what's going on with this living planet of ours. You can never be quite sure what they're going to throw out as well. Sometimes it's burning missiles as big as a Volkswagen or a bus. It certainly has a sense of vulnerability here. Waiting with a little apprehension for the next massive burp. It's a mighty ominous sound that it makes. It really seems as if it comes from the throat of an enormous dragon down there. Something deeper and more powerful than any jet aeroplane.
Get out of there, boys. There's flying rocks in the sky.
only about 750 meters high, but below the surface it curves down another 3,000 meters to the sea floor below.
At the bottom of the sea, the tectonic activity continues to pump superheated fluids through the hydrothermal vents. These are sites of abundant biological activity. And it's possible that the first life on Earth may have begun like this. The Bathysaurus is regarded as the super predator of the deep sea. It waits patiently in the freezing darkness for its prey. Anything it meets, it eats, including its own kind. The lights reveal a pelagic holotherium dancing alone in the darkness, nearly 3,000 meters down. Galatite crabs fight over a strange jellyfish. The largest crabs take the lion's share, while the smallest wait their turn at the feast. A lone whip coral finds a precarious purchase on the volcanic rock. In the ash and sand of a recently active volcano, life soon emerges in the sunlight, just as it has for millions of years. Some of the first to reappear here are the garden eels. Flexing their muscles, they rise out of their burrows in unison. Their food supply, plankton, is delivered by the passing currents. These trevallies are hoping to flush crustaceans out of the volcanic till. But pickings are slim. As the small fish recolonize the area, hiding places can be hard to find. A flagtail blanculo is not taking any chances. This carrier crab senses it's on the menu and pulls on a handy fire urchin for its protection. There's a comforting security from predators under the threatening spines. These clownfish find a safe haven in the tentacles of a stinging anemone, one of the first signs of living habitat on the reef. The Randall shrimp goby shares the safety of a burrow with a shrimp. The little crustacean is almost blind, and it relies on the seeing eyes of its goby companion, one of its antennae never leaving the goby's side. The hairy frogfish stands out in the volcanic landscape, where a passing fish is quickly attracted to its worm-like lure. In an instant, it's all over. At 8 milliseconds, it's one of the fastest killers in the sea. Here in the Coral Triangle, the recovery is vigorous. Within 5 years, This ash-smothered seafloor can return to a reef, boasting over 100 coral species. It's the sheer mass of thousands and thousands of islands spread across the coral triangle that creates the perfect shallow water habitat for corals to flourish. And it's the coral reefs around these islands that gave the coral triangle its rich diversity.
Three, two, one.
Heading down, the scientists will get close to the deep history of the reef. The fish that live in the cooler waters are less affected by extinction events and shed a light on what happened in the past.
One of the interesting things about this region geologically is that when you move the sea level up and down 100 meters, as happens about every 100,000 years, you have very dramatic shifts in water movement pattern because of the way the geology is.
100 meters down, the deep divers have discovered a cave. "10,000 years ago, during the last ice age, the sea level was down here, and this was prime beachfront land. Who knows how many people may have lived here?" The divers are interested in how wave action carved this cave when it was at sea level.
I'm pretty sure it was an old seashore.
Yeah, that was very characteristic of an ancient sea life. You know it's this ancient sea level stand because it's so straight.
Well, it's especially good because there's not much else around. So you get these sloping environments with sand, there's not much cover, and then you get this one section with great cover.
Yeah.
It's an excellent place.
It's like it concentrates the fish. It's like an oasis. So one of the things that is kind of interesting is that we're actually finding fewer new species than we'd expect. We're somewhat surprised to find there isn't higher diversity down deep. We're finding about the same diversity of species down at 100 meters that we find out in the Pacific, in contrast to the shallows where there's 5 times as many species as there is in the Pacific.
Another reason scientists on this trip are so interested in the Coral Triangle is that it has areas of coral more resistant to the effects of climate change. And nowhere is this more apparent than in Raja Ampat, the gateway to the Coral Triangle. It stands at the western tip of New Guinea Island, where the Pacific and the Indian Oceans collide.
Guess where the richest area in the whole world is? Raja Ampat in the Coral Triangle. That's the richest area, and it's very warm.
In a world concerned with climate change, here is a beacon of hope. Perhaps part of the reason why the corals are thriving here is because it's at the confluence of major ocean currents. Here at Raja Ampat, sea temperatures can range as much as 13 degrees Celsius in a day. The convergence of 2 oceans creates cool upwellings, which flush the entire ecosystem.
salt upwellings come from very deep water, and they're extremely nutrient rich.
The availability of food also makes the Coral Triangle into a central meeting point for marine creatures. This is the very womb of the Coral Triangle, where the global roamers regularly converge, refuel and breed as they pass between the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Manta rays are also drawn to the region's rich planktonic soup. For the last 10 years, Nanning's research has concentrated on the effects of climate change.
Exciting to see what's underneath it.
Nanning regularly checks the reef, measuring what's there and how it's growing. If there are any effects from climate change over time, this is where she will find them. For Valerie, this pristine nature reserve is one of the richest places to dive in the Coral Triangle. For Nanning, it's a baseline for comparison to other parts of the region, which have lost up to 40% of their richness and diversity, caused by human activity and climate change. At last count, the variety of fish at Raja Ampat numbered nearly 1,500 species. And many of them grew up in these nurseries.
I've never seen better mangroves than I've seen at Raja Ampat. The water is relatively clear, and this is in common with mangroves. Beautiful coral gardens.
The reefs act as a buffer. They create a sheltered habitat for the mangroves, which in turn provide a vital nursery area for fish. Over 1/3 of the world's mangrove species can be found here.
The mangroves are full of fry, small fish that you can hardly see. The small fish stay there where they're safe until they're big enough to go out into the open ocean. We do find those wonderful archerfish, and they don't feed on other marine animals, they feed on insects, which they shoot out of the branches with a squirt of water.
But it's not completely safe for baby fish. One predator, the black-tip reef shark, has adapted so it can get in at high tide to raid the nursery. But sharks are very rare at Raja Ampat. Most have been taken out by shark fishermen. Otherwise, the Raja Ampat Marine Reserve is relatively untouched because it's very remote. In 2013, the Indonesian government acted to protect the sharks in Raja Ampat and enforced a sanctuary. maybe there's a chance that now it will return to what Valerie remembers as a blue heaven.
And when we entered the water, we were in paradise. It was incredible. You couldn't see through the fish, and that's true. You could not see through the fish. There was everything, from big sharks, it was just everything. You don't know what's out there. There's always the element of surprise and expectation. It could be anything. The manta rays in Raja Ampat are virtually unhunted, untouched. So they have no fear at all, and there's many of them. They come into their cleaning stations to be cleaned because, like all big marine animals, they get parasites, and they rely on the cleaner rats to clean all the parasites off. Frequently, manta rays have pilot fish in front of them. They just stick around there with this very large marine animal that is not dangerous to them because manta rays are plankton eaters. And I think it's important that somebody knows they can come here, and if they want to see manta rays, they can. It's sitting here, this wonderful place, waiting to be explored, full of discoveries that haven't been made yet. There's not many places like that left on this planet.
The nations of the Coral Triangle contain over 360 million people living on many thousands of islands, with a coral coastline that would circle the globe 3 times. Here there is a complex mixture of many different religions and cultures, speaking over 2,000 distinct languages.
They've also got some new colours in there, but I don't mind that. These peoples who live close to the erupting volcanoes are also close to their unconscious selves as well. So there's an enormous amount of extraordinary mysticism and exotica, which has always fascinated me. So the diversity of human beings and of human experience is almost as great as the diversity of creatures in the Coral Triangle.
As long as humans have lived on these islands, they have relied on the Coral Triangle for their survival. It's their food and their future, and its adventures in paradise.
Much of the Coral Triangle is so isolated that they have no alternative yet but to continue using their traditional fishing techniques in order to survive. They came from another village about 40 minutes away, and they're going 2 hours away to the main island of Alor to sell their one fish that they've just caught this morning. So we've done everybody a favour. We take it off their hands, they can go back to their village, and we've got an enormous fish here for about $30. Thank you. That's not even an outboard motor they're using there. It's just a little generator motor. So they wouldn't have had much to get across to Alor, to the south there at all. This is a stonefish he's just brought up here, and he says, yeah, it's got spines. It's not too good if you get stuck by them. So he's out here spearing stonefish and picking them up, and he's going to take them home for the pot. It'll kill you quite easily if you get it wrong and get spiked by one of their spines. It's a wonderful little homemade Hawaiian sling-type spear gun. What sendiri itu kau camata? Dari bambu atau?
Dari kayu.
So he's carved those himself, those goggles, out of wood, and he's using ordinary window pane glass and it's kept around the back of his head with inner tar rubber. So this is a very ecological way of fishing, as you can imagine. Oh, he's got a little octopus in there as well. Oh, there we go, a crocodile needlefish. There are quite a few stories of people being killed by these in their canoes because these fish scoot along like a sort of woody woodpecker with just their tails in the water, or they can fly out like a spear right out of the water, and quite a few fishermen have been found dead in their canoes with one of these fish impaling them in their throats.
Sudah.
Sudah, Pak. Terima kasih
Ya,
banyak.
terima kasih.
Terima kasih, John. Di situ, di sebelah keranjangnya ikan itu, di bawah itu kan. Kalau bisa, the only people in Indonesia who make these giant fish traps. And he says he's been here all his life, and I say how beautiful it is. What a fantastic place. This clear crystal water, full of fish, whales come across. He says, yes, but he says, they're poor. Di mana airnya tadi kita taruh? So he says he can get 100 fish at least in each of these pots a day, and it's more than enough to feed his own family, and he's got plenty left over to sell as well. He uses no bait whatsoever. They just all swim in. You can't find a more ecological way of fishing the environment. This is essentially a maritime nation. We talk about it as a country, but they refer to themselves as this sovereign land and water of ours. So when we lose what has been definitely a sustainable fishing technique amongst all these traditional peoples of the Coral Triangle, we face its imminent destruction.
But the people of the Coral Triangle live their lives on the edge of imminent destruction. The tectonic rage that has given them such abundance can easily take it away.
Being so tectonically active, Indonesia is constantly racked by earthquake and tsunami, which buries entire islands.
They arrive at the town of Lamalera, Flores.
Bagaimana dalam di sini?
Lawrence goes to a Bajau village, where a fisherman recalls how he lost his whole family in the tsunami.
They saw the wave coming. There was no warning of it, but they saw it coming, and they began running inland, but his younger brother was killed because the house came down on top of him with the wave.
Wherever he goes in Indonesia, Lawrence finds the Bajau Laut people living a nomadic life in the shadow of the volcanoes.
All the Bajau set up at certain seasons temporary stilted houses. They are the equivalent to the gypsies of the sea.
Di rumah sini?
Yeah.
Untuk saya sendiri, keluarga saya.
Well, he said he was a 10-year-old when the 92 earthquake struck and sent this big tsunami through here, which killed at least 2,000 people along the coast here. And in this little tiny community, killed 100 people.
On December the 12th, 1992, a tremor in Flores touched off several tsunamis.
All along the northern coast of Flores, killed about 2,000 to 5,000 people. It's rather difficult to estimate how many.
Like many of her people, Nanning is philosophical about the dangers of living here.
We are a country with the most volcanic mountains. We are in a very active tectonic movement. Tsunami is part of our life we have to deal with. On the good hand, it's giving us a lot of this dynamic habitat that is changing from time to time because of this. It gives us the richness it gives both underwater and on the
That's
land.
right.
But then, yeah, we have to pay for it.
The long, shallow slope of the volcanoes underwater has created a problem for the divers. The water isn't deep enough for them to do their research.
We really haven't been able to get down, to our target depth, 100, 110 meters. So if we can do that here, where it looks like we're this close to the shore, we won't have a long lateral swim like we did the other day. So that's...
Maybe this hole here is the deepest section here. Well, that's pretty good for you guys. Look at that.
Very good. All right, then. That looks good. It looks like it's the right conditions.
The Bishop Museum divers are down at 100 metres. Here the search continues for a new species. One small fish could hold a clue to a big mystery. Meanwhile, one of the things that Valerie has noticed is that there are very few sharks left in the Coral Triangle.
Even in Roger Ampat, you don't see hardly any sharks. You're lucky to see them. Where the first time I went there, we saw sharks every time we went in the water.
Shark conservation became the focus of her life with her husband Ron. And the survival of sharks has become even more poignant to Val since Ron died.
When we first came here, every dive there were sharks. We saw all sorts of sharks. They were everywhere. Not dangerous, just minding their own business. Now, you can be here on a 2-week trip and not see a single shark. They've been finned. They take them for their fins.
Do you remember that?
Oh, Marky. Yes.
Valerie taught her 2 nephews, Jono and Mark Hayes, to dive with sharks at a very early age.
That's when I was training you to be a shark wrangler.
I think I was set up right from the start. And I
you
used
were
to
on
have to go out and spear fish and let you know when the sharks had arrived.
That's exactly right, yes.
You'd say to Ron, what do you think, Ron? Ron would look over the side and have a look at the behaviour of the sharks. And he said, yeah, I think we can go in now. You just swim down real fast, Marky, with little Neffy, with this pile of dead fish on a coat hanger.
That's right.
So wait till we're set up and then you swim down as quick as you can and bring those baits down and tie them up to the reef.
Ooh, the shark bait has such teeth, dear.
And I'm sitting in there shaking in the boat saying, don't you think it's too risky? And Ron looks at me and says, it's a calculated risk, Mark. We should be fine.
And he keeps it out of sight.
But there are far greater dangers for the deep-sea divers than sharks, like getting caught in a changing tide. The Bishop Museum divers are down at the limit. Down here, any problem can quickly develop into a life-threatening situation. As happens when they are pinned to the bottom in a powerful current. As the current increases, the deep divers are forced to abandon their dive and concentrate on their survival. The lunar landscape bottom holds little traction, and they struggle to make headway against the deadly current. They can't just swim up. It takes hours of decompression to surface after a deep dive. The divers have been down longer than expected. Richard releases a safety buoy to let everybody above know where he is. Meanwhile, the weather has changed. The ship's captain, Mark, is concerned.
Yeah, this is one of the main risks with their diving. You know, once they go down for 3 hours, they can't come back up. Once they go deep, they've got to step their way back up slowly. We got one out here being picked up in the lead. The other two guys, I think, must have got sucked out the back of the rock there where you can see the current against the waves. The biggest danger at this stage is losing sight of those two guys in the water. You can only just see their heads there. This is the sort of situation you don't want to happen because the team is split up. You've got one guy over here, you've got two guys out there in the current sort of getting sucked out to sea with white water breaking over their heads. They are getting dragged out into that rip. As you can see there, they wouldn't be able to swim against it.
It was exhausting.
Yeah, if they've got one on board, now they've just got to get out and get those other two guys without swamping the speedboat. They're approaching them now. The boat will probably get blown around in the wind when they stop. And the worst thing that can happen, of course, is a wave start breaking into the back of the boat, which could potentially sink the boat, everyone and all the gear with it. See how it's that sloppy zone there where they are? That's where the current's at its strongest, where it's dragging against the wind and it's creating those white caps.
Wow, that was quite a down current down there.
This deep diving, you know, they go so deep they've got to spend so much time in the water. You know, you don't know what the weather's going to do while they're down there in a 3-hour period, 4-hour period. And it's definitely a different situation than when they got in, I think. As soon as they get back, we'll pull the anchor up and get out of here. It's not looking good for the afternoon.
A few days later, on their final dive, the scientists at last discover a new species.
I got it! Right in here. Oh, she's a beaut. A new species, a kind of Chromis damsel. It looks like one we named the other.
Yeah, it looks like Chromis rhino, but it doesn't have a white spot, and it's got different color fin.
And there it is, gentlemen. That's the one I was so excited about.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful picture.
Oh my God, that's definitely a new species. Yeah. Well, it's got the blue over the eyes, which the other one doesn't have, and it's got the yellow pelvic fin.
The scientists have found only one new deep-water species. But ironically, they've made a much more important discovery. The lack of new species confirms their theory that diversity down deep is much the same here as it is in the Pacific. So why is it that the shallow reefs of the Coral Triangle have 5 times the diversity of the Pacific?
Now, if you can imagine, every 100,000 years, the sea level goes up and down by 100 meters or so. So if you can imagine dropping the sea level down to here, in the Pacific, you get these great pillars of limestone rock sticking up out of the water. What happens is these habitats all become extinguished. They disappear. And because of that, the fishes that live in those habitats also disappear. But if you look in the Coral Triangle, as the sea level drops, the habitats simply move down the slope, because every time the sea level is, you still have this shoreline habitat. So the habitats that were up here are now down here. So whereas you've eliminated the habitats in the Pacific Islands, you've maintained them here in the Coral Triangle. And because of that, over millions of years, these species persists as the sea level goes up and down. These species and these habitats just move up and down this bathymetry. And from the coral triangle, eventually recolonize these habitats that were wiped out when the sea level was lower. So in that way, the coral triangle is sort of like the mother of all coral reefs in the Indo-Pacific region.
The deep divers' findings confirm that the coral triangle is a unique archive of marine species and seeds many of the world's tropical reefs.
This is coral triangle, and like the species, the coral species just like going like attenuate like outside the coral triangle. So it is the mother of corals. It is important, and that's why actually we work hard to save it, because it is the mother of the coral. Coral triangle is a strong ecosystem because they have a lot of diversity. So the same as us, we have a lot of diversity. Ecologically, it gives us the economic, social, and cultural benefits. We have 120 million people depending on the marine resources. And these people cannot be cut off from the resources. But what we need is to have more people managing these resources and these people. So many different tribes living in the different islands with so many different languages. It's supposed to make us stronger, because then we can help each other out.
The mother of all reefs is a great archive of marine life, a powerhouse of nature. And it's a precious global resource that must be kept alive and thriving. But it's also under threat from overfishing, pollution, and climate change. For this reason, the Six Nations, Indonesia, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, the Solomon Islands, and Timor-Leste, united to create the Coral Triangle Initiative and save this great natural wonder for the future. Next episode, we discover Ocean Central, the tropical convergence of the Pacific and Indian Oceans, where we will meet the world's biggest marine creatures as they join the amazing mass of life feeding from the currents of the Coral Triangle. It was the Earth's tectonic rage that forged the foundations of the Coral Triangle. But according to world whale expert Dr. Benjamin Kahn, volcanoes do much more than that. He believes that whales may use the sound of the volcanoes to navigate the narrow passages of the Coral Triangle.
It makes a big rumble every 15 to 20 minutes. So these blue whales and other sperm whales and other whales that we have in the area, they'll home in on an isolated oceanic island like this, like Komba. So it's like an underwater lighthouse. It's a beacon along the migration path.
Here in the Coral Triangle, many of the world's species of marine mammals converge on this undersea interchange that connects the Pacific and Indian Oceans. But what brings these ocean wanderers to these narrow island passages, swimming perilously close to the shore and against the strong currents? The answer to this is another clue to the richness of life in the Coral Triangle. It's the Indonesian through-flow current. The transfer of seawater here is 10 times greater than all the rivers on Earth and carries nutrients that feed all the life in the Coral Triangle. Our expedition has joined the movable feast to follow the great ocean mammals as they navigate the narrow straits between the Banda and Savu seas. Also on the Seven Seas is pioneer undersea explorer Valerie Taylor and her nephews, ship's captain Mark Hayes and underwater cameraman Jono Hayes.
You know, Mark, back in the 70s, there were a lot of whales and a lot of sharks all through this area.
Valerie is most interested in sharks, which have almost disappeared due to fishing since she first came here 40 years ago.
We'll get Lawrence to do that.
Yes, Lawrence will be good at that.
He can go in and make contact with them.
Anthropologist Lawrence Blair is focusing on how 100 million coastal dwelling people and traditional fishermen who depend directly on the Coral Triangle for their livelihoods are surviving in the middle of the world's fastest growing economic region.
As an anthropologist, I realized here was a nation of ancient memories and many different tribal linguistic groups and fascinating animals. And that set me on this long course of exploring amongst these people.
Our voyage into this part of the Coral Triangle takes us through the exotic islands of East Indonesia, where the through-flow of currents and the cool upwellings combine to feed this Amazon of the oceans. Benjamin Kahn is here to investigate why the Coral Triangle is such a mecca to whales, particularly the giant blue whale, Acrylita, and the sperm whale, which is a toothed variety and dives deep to feed on squid.
I'm very interested in this part of East Indonesia because there's a big migration corridor here that we are moving through right now. And it's part of a series of migration passages that we've been studying. In addition to blue whales, we can expect sperm whales moving through here and a variety of oceanic dolphins. So for me, it's really interesting to be out here and see how it can be managed in a more protective manner. There's 18,000 islands here. So you gotta find out, where do you find these animals? They're rare, they're endangered, there's not that many of them swimming around, and even though blue whale is 30 meters, it can be very, very hard to find. There's 1,250 blue whales in the whole southern hemisphere. So that is a very small number. And that comes down from about 400,000 blue whales that were once swimming there. They were hunted relentlessly.
A boom in whales. Competition makes the hunt for the great leviathans keener than ever, and modern methods have eliminated chance and risk. And it's all over, bar the profitable business of turning the carcass into money. So certain nowadays are the whalers of their prey that the giant sea mammals are growing scarce in the usual whaling waters. If they're not careful, there won't be any whales left soon.
We know a couple of things about the blue whales that we see in Indonesia. We know the start of their migration. It's in the sub-Antarctic or even the Antarctic waters, way down south. And then they'll move up the Australian coast. First up is Perth and the Perth Canyon. And these whales will stop there and forage. It's a very productive area. We know that they feed there from our Australian colleagues that have done a lot of work down in Perth. And then they scoot up the West Australian coast. And they'll pretty much do that in one straight swim through. And then they'll come into the Savu Sea. And the next phase is going through the passages near Alor or Wetar. And then they've entered the Banda Sea. So there's really a big question mark about the Banda Sea and what it means for blue whales. The other great whale we get in Indonesian waters are sperm whales. The males are very rare, but when we do see them, we drop everything on the boat and we go after them. No one has really ever been here. Nobody's really had a good look around. So it's exciting to survey this part of Indonesia. So when we're talking about a dynamic oceanographic region, this is what we're talking about. It's a lowering tide. On top of that, the Indonesian flow-through, which comes from the Pacific and empties out close by in the Indian Ocean, adds another 2 knots or so. So there'll be 7 or 8 knots of current right here. It hits the shore, it becomes like a waterfall at sea, and it really rips through this interlocking inter-island passage. It's ripping through, man. That's really, really amazing. Screaming.
The complex coastlines, the deep channels, and the strong tidal currents create massive turbulence. The current sweeps through like an undersea cyclone, spreading rich nutrients among more than 2,000 species of reef fish, 5 times more than elsewhere in the Indo-Pacific. But it's not just the reef creatures that feed off the nutrients of this ocean interchange. Ben is a world authority on sperm whales and has been studying their migration through this area. He knows their language and uses a hydrophone to listen in on their conversations as they dive for squid down to 1,000 meters below.
You're listening to the open ocean, well beyond the horizon. So I'll go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, not only horizontally, but also down. It's a 3-dimensional environment, so I'm listening to a vast column of ocean, 16 nautical miles across, and maybe 3,000 meters deep. And in everything that's vocalizing, I want to be able to pick it up. Oh, this is really good. We have a group of sperm whales towards Timor. Not quite that far, but that's the general direction. So I can hear them echolocating, clicking away underwater. So those are all the diving whales hunting for squid. A single sperm whale would make sort of a rhythmic echolocation sound, 2 clicks a second. But then if you get 12 or 20 down below, it becomes more like a horse race. And that's what I'm hearing now. So when I'm twisting the directional hydrophone from side to side, I can get a bearing. I can find out the direction of where these whales are. And now we're switching from survey mode into tracking mode. So that way is where we're going. So we should really keep a good lookout now, because they're diving, but when they come up, they'll only come up for about 10 minutes, and then they'll go down for another 45 minutes, hunting for squid, come back up, 10-minute rest, bit of a breather, and down they go again. There's a male making a mating call sound. So that's a very particular vocalization. Bing! That's the male. It's like having an empty oil barrel and hitting it with a hammer. Ding! Ding! And they'll do that about once every 5 seconds. So I got that right underneath the boat. But then a little bit further out, there are the clicking females. There he is again. So they're the clicking females, and there's a foraging clicks. When they come up, the females will know that on the surface there'll be a breeding bull in the vicinity. It's not a fully grown male, but it's about 14, perhaps 15 meters, which is a sexually and socially mature bull. And it confirms that the Indonesian waters, and especially the Savu Sea, are part of a calving and breeding area. He's not coming here to forage and go after squid. He's after a good time in the tropics.
The foraging females come to the surface with their calves and juveniles.
The male has a roving strategy, so the male will come to the tropics, seek out groups of females, these nursery pods, check out the females, stay with them for hours, possibly days, and then move on again. And there are vocalizations that are called codas. Now, codas is almost like a Morse code, and it's a digital language if you think about it. It's ones and zeros, it's on and off, it's a very precise language. Those are social vocalizations as opposed to foraging and echolocation. So these animals have a very sophisticated social organization. They stay in their particular matrilineal group for life. So there'd be aunties and youngsters of both sexes, and then the males split off in their teenage years. But the females stay together. The older animals here would be females, and they have 2 subadults in their care. This particular female, that's actually the closest. So she's shielding them a little bit. She's just a little bit protective. She's shielding them and staying between us and the youngster. So we're seeing the whole sperm whale family at the moment. These bulls, because they're so much bigger than the females, they were hunted selectively. So there's a big change in the sex ratio. There's hardly any of those big bulls left, especially not by the end of the 80s. Slowly but surely, these big bulls are growing up and making a comeback. So yeah, for sure, it's exciting.
For hundreds of years, sperm whales were hunted for their oils. And these passages of the Coral Triangle were a favourite hunting ground.
Those early whalers came through this area on a global voyage. The historical knowledge of the whales goes back a long time, centuries. So we know from the Portuguese that there were whales here. We know from the Portuguese also that there were whale hunters here, traditional whale hunters. And then the Yankee whalers came through. And we know that there was a particular male sperm whale called Timor Tom, who created quite a bit of havoc around Timor Island. From the logbooks of those early whalers, we know that there were sperm whales out here in abundance. That was their target species. They were after the oil in the spermaceti organ of the sperm whales.
Ben has found a giant bull sperm whale, mature and much bigger than the one he found before.
The big male just surfaced. He's traveling in the same direction as the mother and the juvenile, yes. He's about twice the size. So that is a phenomenal encounter, because these animals, they can dive to about 3,000 meters deep. They have a jaw that can bite a man in half, but this is a very big, powerful apex predator. And it's not in Indonesia to hunt, it's in Indonesia to mate.
Sperm whales, circulating between the northern and southern hemispheres, come together in the narrow island passages of the Coral Triangle to feast and mate. This bull is a rare survivor from the whaling boom of the 1970s, when the males were specially targeted.
The males are very big, almost twice the size as the females, and they weigh about 3 times. So a male is about 18 meters maximum and 45 tons. So we have to take extra care, of course, with such a big, powerful animal, not to upset it in any way. It's just spectacular to see such a big apex predator of the deep so close to a speedboat, which in comparison looks more like a toothpick. And then when the tail comes up, you realize how powerful this animal actually are. One little whack with this tail and we'd be flying all over the place out of our little speedboat. This whale is really trying to get a connection with these females that are also around here. And he's on a mission.
But the prospect of swimming with him is tempered by the memory of a bad experience.
and I was x-rayed by a sperm whale. I was doing a frontal drop with sperm whales, going up the front in order to get more information on the water. And it's starting to blast me with its echolocation sound, but it is very intense. It's like somebody really hitting on your chest very hard. It's hurtful. The animal opened up its jaw and I could count the teeth, and at that stage I was doing a big back pedal. I have this living submarine that is pinging you intensely, and that lasted for about 30 or 40 seconds, and then it swam off. But that certainly left a very vivid memory. As you get closer and closer to this big, massive sperm whale bull, you see it appear out of the blue. It's just such a big animal. What we see on the surface is just a glimpse. It's like an iceberg with 90% of it underwater. It is massive. Maybe a good 40 tons. And then you get closer still and you can see the contour and then the wrinkles on the skin and then the fluke, the tail, which is about 3.5 meters across. And then you're finning and finning and finning and finning, and suddenly it strikes you. You're not really getting any closer, but it doesn't seem to be doing anything. It's just gliding effortless through the water with all its bulk. And then the animal just goes with one little fluke up and down, very relaxed, and it just takes off right away. And not only does it take off, I'm getting the washout, so whatever comes off that fluke, big volumes of water as it propels itself and pushes itself through the water, I'm getting all of that going. I'm like, wow, and then it's all over. There's no way you can catch up again. Underwater, they just are so much bigger than just from the surface. I mean, just the girth and the volume of it. And not only does it take off, but you're getting this washout. It's like, you know, you're completely set back. Amazing power, without any effort whatsoever.
In a modern world where whaling is almost taboo, there's one place where sperm whales are still hunted, and it's here in the heart of the Coral Triangle. The people in the village of Lamalera take 6 or more whales a year for food and spiritual sustenance. It seems a curious place for a whale conservationist like Ben, who's been coming here for more than 10 years.
This is part of the Savu Sea Whale program. So we're coming into this village to look at their traditional way of life, because it is a special village in that respect, how to hunt sperm whales in particular. And secondly, I'm assessing it on modern influences and the degree of modernization.
I was lucky enough to come here in the sort of late 70s for the first time, and it was an incredibly wild and woolly place. They would sacrifice the brains of manta rays on the prows of their little hunting vessels. They had human skulls of their ancestors in the back over here. Selamat pagi. Selamat pagi, Bapak dibilang. Terima kasih. This is the harpoon head that goes into these long bamboo harpoons.
It sticks in here with that coil attached. And when the thing takes off and there's a whale in the neighborhood and it is harpooned, there'll be ropes shooting left, right, and center. You have to be very, very careful where you stand, or otherwise these coiled ropes might well take you over the side.
This would be part of their traditional religion. Those would be going back hundreds of years, those symbols. And of course it is found right next to Saint Peter, Saint Peter. So they are caught between two stools at this very moment in history.
Here's some of the skulls from previous hunts.
Wow, look at that.
They save the bones and they actually do the hunt in an ancestral belief that these sperm whales are their forefathers, and they'll have to go out, catch them to bring them back, bring them home, so to speak. And that includes scattering the bones around the village. So, in essence, they are trying to reunite. They're worried about this whole ancestral connectivity, which is very strong throughout Indonesia. but especially also here in Lamalera where it has a sea connection. And when they see sperm whales, they have to go out there and bring it back to the village, bring it back home, bring it back into the family. But if you live here and you're born here and you see all this around you, you see all these special activities and all the way how the whale is cut up according to rank and who does what on the boat, there's a phenomenal system in place here dealing with how whales are supposed to be treated. Not only killed, but also treated once they are killed.
The modern world is fast catching up with Lamalera. In the last 2 years, a road came through, and with it came TV and mobile phones, motorbikes, and unfortunately for the whales, outboard engines.
I was walking along and I got waved over by 3 elders, and I've known them for quite some years. And very quickly the conversation took a turn to what Lamalera wants to be in the future. And it looks like they're getting very serious about turning back the clock, in the sense that there's been a lot of change in this village. There's been motors and modernization and all the things I look for. And these guys actually want to change all that back and stay pure.
There has been no whales for 2 months now, and there is concern amongst the whale hunters that if they don't protect their traditional ways, they will break the bond with their ancestors, and the whales will disappear.
Kebudayaan di sini sampai kami mati.
Do you feel you can still continue following your own traditional culture with these new things that are coming in? Yes, they said.
Sampai kami semua mati.
Then I asked them, well, what about your religion? Because they've had a Christian pastor here who died not so long ago. Do you feel that you can hold on to your traditional practices and embrace the new? Yes, they said. And if we have no whales and we're not allowed to hunt whales here anymore, we will die.
Agama pun tetap kami pertahankan.
If they go back to their traditional ways of hunting the sea, it'll be very good for the Savo Sea ecosystem, because it means that they will be doing things that they've been doing for hundreds of years, and the productivity of the Savo Sea can most likely cope with it.
Lamalerans taking 6 whales a year may be sustainable, but these leviathans stop for nothing and regularly collide with whales.
Out in the wide open sea, the chance of a collision course between the ship and a whale, they're actually quite small. But when you get to a passageway where the ships are getting concentrated and the marine life is getting concentrated and the whales are getting concentrated, that's where your overlap and your chance of a direct hit increase significantly.
So we're doing our whale survey in the migration corridors between Pantar and Lembata, and it's also a shipping lane, it's a sea route. It's quite noisy where the propeller and the engines are, but it's relatively quiet at the bow. Sometimes whales misjudge the distance and they get hit.
But it's not just ships that are a menace to whales. Endless rivers of rubbish also ride the currents of the Coral Triangle.
So while we are tracking sperm whales in this ocean wilderness, this is one of the most insidious ones. We call these the silent killers. It's a big current line full of plastic debris. Right? It doesn't biodegrade or anything like that, so that's in the ocean for a long, long time. And it accumulates in these current lines where a lot of filter feeders do their foraging. And they ingest it, it blocks their stomach, and then they can't feed anymore and they'll die of starvation. With the increased wealth of the nation comes more consumption, and there's no waste management, so everything eventually ends up in the sea. And this junk, it'll stay there.
The great currents of the Coral Triangle also bring plastics to the shore in the backwaters and bays. One man's trash is another man's treasure. On their way home from the fish market, Valerie Taylor and her nephew Jono make a rich discovery.
This could be really interesting. We have a strip of sort of plastic garbage like this at Ampat.
Yeah.
And it goes down and meets the ocean. And it's the best muck diving I've ever seen. Best critters. Because they live, whoops, in all these bits and pieces that are hanging around. They just don't step in anything awful.
There might even be human feces around here.
Oh, that was horrible. There's a lot of good muck critters. They live in places like that. And I think that if we get the chance, we should have a dive.
A dive where?
Out there.
I can't imagine anything living out there, Valerie.
There must be something.
Valerie can't resist a dive with creatures that live in the muck.
I love seeing a river of muck and having a dive in it. And it actually shows how adaptable marine animals can be, that they live in this muck. It's the floating muck that is so bad, and there's so much of it. The muck that I sort of enjoy most is sunken muck. It's not going anywhere. It's like a sunken ship. You know, a sunken ship becomes a reef. The adaptability of the small animals is very impressive. And many fish live in tins and bottles. I don't think we should ever take a bottle out of the ocean and think that we are cleaning it up. Bottles are very important. They make great homes for a lot of creatures, and they're made of sand. So as they disintegrate, they just turn back into sand.
Being right next to the fish markets.
That helps. You see, it's just sand, and the junk on it gives them a home. It gives them a base, like a settlement plate or a house or something.
As she discovered over many years of diving, it's not pretty, but it's not the strongest that survive, but the ones most responsive to change. Adaptation has made the Coral Triangle the most enduring tropical ecosystem in the world.
Octopus are very clever the way they can make a home in almost anything. A broken glass, an old bottle, under a spoon. They're one of the most fascinating of all the sea creatures. And they can work things out very quickly.
The Seven Seas rides the currents through the Straits of Pantar. But a family going home in the opposite direction can't make any headway, even with the engine at full power. Mark realises the boat is dangerously close to the rocks.
But I don't want to pull them along the rocks in case they spear off and crash into the rocks. So they've got to come out, away from the rocks, and then we'll take the rope. They don't understand. Scary. Okay, let it go. We're in.
They managed to get the locals around the corner and on their way.
That's how good deep for the day. That's what these people are up against, this current, man. It's just so strong. Can't get home. You miss the tide.
More than 100 million people depend on the Coral Triangle for their survival. They know their currents well, but still hundreds of lives are taken every year by the same force that feeds them. The reef is rich in coral, but Valerie's search for the schools of sharks she used to see has been in vain. But she's found another shark that comes to the Coral Triangle to feed in the currents. And it's the biggest shark of all, the whale shark. This filter-feeding giant has found a fast food outlet. Bait fish in the nets of the tuna fishing station. And one fish's bait becomes another fish's banquet.
The guys that live on the floating fish platforms are tuna fishermen, and they harvest great netfuls of anchovies and keep them alive to attract the tuna. But they attract the whale sharks as well. We had 8 or 9 sharks at the one time. You don't want to get in the middle of them because they're very hard and heavy, and they couldn't care less about you. But I pulled the net around me and got right up to the mouth and was filming these fish going in. They were shoving each other around and playing around. They were doing things I've never thought a whale shark could do. They were having fun.
But there's another giant island wanderer that harnesses the currents of the Coral Triangle to make ocean passages. with a combined coastline that could wrap around the world 3 times. The Coral Triangle Islands are ideal for crocodiles. Like the turtle, it still wears its heavy reptilian armour, but is known for lightning strikes on its prey. At the eastern end of our journey lies the island of Wetar, where the crocodile has a very special status. They are almost universally feared, but here they are treated as gods, because the people believe the crocodiles are their ancestors.
The people of Wetar have always had a close relation with this animal. There are special crocodile clans here. They predominate amongst the few clans in Wetar. The pure Wetarese consider their ancestors to be crocodiles. If they come across a dead crocodile, they will afford it all the pomp of a human funeral. And there are, on the islands here, special crocodile callers who can go and actually call the crocodiles. Every day she is here, that is her nest piled up there. And apparently there will be eggs there in the nest. They don't know what he eats, but obviously he manages to eat enough to sustain a really quite large crocodile. I feel a little sensitive about interviewing this lady because apparently she lost her child to this crocodile on the river, which she lives right next to, last year. So if a crocodile does eat a human, they don't kill the crocodile, they hold a special ceremony to pacify the relationship between crocodiles and humans. Oh, yeah. There's a little cave you can see just on the other side of the river. Several times a day he comes out down this river right next to these people, out into the sea, back in again over there. He even occasionally comes up on this side of the river, which presumably is how the child was lost just a year ago. Here's our crocodile caller. A few months ago, a fellow was killed here by a crocodile. A coconut fell out of the tree and landed in the water, and he leant over to pick up the coconut. The crocodile got him. And it was after that that this gentleman had one of the rituals invoking the crocodile's presence and hopefully pacifying the relationship between humans and the crocodile. This is like their religion and the story of their birth from the mother and father crocodile gods. All these people are united, however different they are in the Coral Triangle. They are united by the belief in an invisible world, of being more real than the material world. He says he's going to be coming up soon. It's enormous. Did you see that? One gets lulled into a sense of false security waiting here for an hour and a half.
Ben is elated with his earlier encounter with the massive sperm whale. But the rare blue whale he hoped to see here has eluded him. So it comes as almost a last-minute miracle when one of these rare giants crosses his path.
We were heading back after all of that, and then in a very narrow corridor passage, there was a raging current, and there was a blue whale right in that current.
Blue whale?
There's a lot of current rushing through from the Pacific into the Indian Ocean, and we could follow it on the water. It was only 3-4 meters under the water all the time, so we could see it. So we placed the speedboat in the same speed and the same course, and when it came up, it was maybe 15 meters away. Getting close to a blue whale is always a challenge. It is a very difficult animal to get close to.
The blue whale is the largest animal ever to have lived on our planet. Yet it eats tiny krill.
Which is on the surface and looping around very close to shore.
Wow.
And I've never seen anything like that in 10 meters at times, where the local kids were screaming and yahooing from excitement. And spouts and big blows, but very close to shore. So we were all actually very excited and yahooing. This whale is really well behaved. I mean, it's doing the same thing. And it came up really close to the boat. He's doing this loop again. He's right in front of us. But it's the second time he's done this loop. Initially I thought it might have been an error because there was so much current that I thought that animal went broadside and then got swung over by the push of the water, but it did that at least 4 times. It did that. Getting close to a blue whale is always a challenge. It is a very difficult animal to get close to because they only come up for 30 seconds, 1 or 2 blows, and they're down again for 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. And if those 20 minutes the animal changes course on the water and you're still going that particular direction, which it has been doing for the last hour or 2, you'll be surprised how quickly you can lose a 30-meter whale. It can just vanish like that. We collected a lot of really interesting data. Going out wide into the Savu Sea and encountering 2 male sperm whales in close proximity to one another. That is another really interesting observation because males are supposed to have some kind of standoff before they migrate up. We photographed both of them, we identified both of them, so I'm quite glad to have those on file. We haven't seen any large-scale fishing boats, we haven't seen any longliners, we haven't seen any drift nets, we haven't seen much gill netting. So this area is still very much a wild and wonderful piece of the ocean. There's a big storm brewing and there's a front coming through as well, so it's getting late and we still have a ways to go, so I'll have to break off. I'm going to say goodbye to the whales and hopefully continue on tomorrow. Let's get out of here.
The The ocean highways of the Coral Triangle are still open, and the 6 nations of the Coral Triangle Initiative are working together to save this unique World Heritage Area. But the pressure of pollution, climate change, and an Asian economic boom is fast encroaching. Next episode, we focus on the people who live in this paradise and see what is being done to find solutions for the future. We have seen how the Coral Triangle was created from tectonic activity beginning tens of millions of years ago. The deep diving scientists have identified how the gentle underwater slopes maintain habitat for reef species as the sea levels fall during ice ages. This may have helped life in the Coral Triangle to survive numerous extinction events and become an archive of the tropical seas. We visited reefs where the coral, flushed by the currents, was able to survive in warm waters that would destroy it in other parts of the ocean. We saw the convergence of the Pacific and Indian Oceans, churning through the narrow passages of the Coral Triangle. Attracting many of the great ocean wanderers. And perhaps the greatest ocean wanderers of all were the humans. Around 60,000 years ago, the first people arrived here in Southeast Asia. DNA shows they came from Africa, beach hopping through the tropics during the last ice age. The warm waters provided a rich source of seafood. More than 100 million people depend on the Coral Triangle for their survival. But the pressure is building, and the future of this great mother reef is in the balance. The Coral Triangle is the world's epicenter of marine diversity. But it also lies at the economic epicenter of the 21st century. The export of seafood from the Coral Triangle to wealthy world markets is bringing billions of dollars each year into the Southeast Asian economy. But nature is struggling to keep up with the industrial fishing. With millions of people depending on the sea for survival, the pressure on the ecosystem is enormous. And as traditional fishermen find their food sources disappearing rapidly, they are taking what is left of the breeding stocks with dynamite. The reef has been flattened by a quick and cheap way for the fishermen to get a catch. But it destroys the very environment that feeds them. Our journey through the Coral Triangle has revealed the great diversity of the planet's richest source of marine life. Vital to the future of most of the ocean's coral reef species. Now we are exploring the impact of the global economy. And we meet people who, despite great difficulties, continue to believe in the Coral Triangle as a place of promise and hope. But the challenges are great. Marine biologist Naneng Satayasi and underwater explorer Valerie Taylor have found evidence of bombing at nearly every reef they have dived on. It's hard to find any reef around populated areas that's not been dynamited.
Well, that was a bit of a mixture. You know? There was some good patches, terrible bomb blast, and then you can see how rich it used to be. You were right, so rich.
I was kind of sad because I was expecting things that I saw like 10 years ago.
The use of cyanide to stun the fish for the lucrative live export trade is also widespread throughout the Coral Triangle.
Cyanide fishing is so destructive. Dynamite fishing is even worse.
The problem is the enforcement because it's just so many islands.
Nanning and anthropologist Lawrence Blair go ashore to try and find the source of the blast fishing.
Yang pakai bom kadang-kadang masih ada. Yang ngebom biasanya siapa, Pak? Orang Bajo dari Maumere.
It's Nanning's job to protect the reefs, and she goes to visit the Bajau Laut, the sea gypsies, who locals have accused of bombing the reef.
The biggest priority, of course, is managing the people. And the biggest priority in managing the people is to have a good foundation of law and regulation and enforce it. At the same time, creating the economic development that is fair to people who use these resources.
The Bajau Laut are stateless nomads and traditional small-scale fishermen. There are more than 1 million Bajau people within the Coral Triangle.
Sore-sore. Nggak pada mancing? Atau kalau malam mancing?
Malam.
Oh malam, kalau siang gini nggak dapet?
Nggak dapat.
Semua mancing? Nelayan? Oh semua nelayan, nggak ada yang bertahan atau apa? Emang lagi musim nggak banyak ikan, nggak ngelihat ikan pas diving?
Kurang mancing pengaruh angin.
Oh lagi emang gitu, kayak gitu juga?
Iya.
Atau mancing biasa atau ikut kapal?
Tali senar yang kecil
juga.
It's traditional small-scale fishermen like the Bajau Laut that have suffered most from the overfishing of the Coral Triangle and are always under suspicion for bombing what is left.
They said they do line fishing. They no longer do the fishing with cyanide and fishing with bombing. That's what they said. Assalamualaikum, Bu, Pak.
The Coral Triangle Initiative was created by 6 nations to protect the ecosystem. But it's a challenge to feed the population while creating marine reserves. Travelling towards Malaysia, on the western edge of the Coral Triangle, we find one of the greatest marine parks on the planet. Sipadan Island. Sipadan is a sanctuary protected by Malaysia. Fishing is forbidden here. This tiny island is a magnet for divers from all over the world and an inspiration for a plan to turn the whole region into a shark sanctuary. An Australian marine biologist and sustainability expert, Dr. Mark Meakin, has come here to calculate the breeding population of sharks and help a local dive operator, Rowan Perkins, to prepare a proposal for the government.
The nice thing about a shark sanctuary is it increases the visibility of the place, and hopefully over time actually increases the number of sharks. If you're going ahead of me and you see some sharks, just let me know, and I'll get this thing out in front of me and I'll try and film them as we go around, okay?
The 2 cameras give a 3D video image that helps Mark estimate the size of the sharks and measure the population over time.
It's a beautiful dive. You jump in the water, the reef on your shoulder, this big drop off, deep, deep water on one side, and a wall of fish. I mean, a wall of fish as you rocket down in the current. The problem with it is that Cyprian is one of the last places you can do that in Southeast Asia.
These waters were once full of sharks. The top predator kept everything in balance.
Having sharks in place is vital to the recovery of reefs. You throw the whole system out of whack when you take out the species that regulates the abundance of others.
The idea of the Sempona Shark Sanctuary is to create an area where we can protect the breeding stock, because we know we have sharks in this area.
Not only is there a shark crisis in the Coral Triangle, in fact there's a worldwide crisis in sharks. In the last couple of decades there's been a huge increase in demand for shark fin, and that's principally coming from China. Cyprian is really one of the last places you can see reasonable populations of sharks. Many of the other places, the sharks are now gone. They've been fished pretty much to commercial extinction. There's a seed population there that maybe could do something to repopulate the area generally, and no point in attempting that unless you've got a sanctuary in place. The more tourists you have coming in, the more dollars that come into the communities, and that's the key.
The diving industry alone into Sabah brings in around 195 million ringgit a year, whereas, you know, legal shark fishing brings in around 5 million ringgit a year.
Only a few hours away from Cyprian is one of Malaysia's prime diving resorts, here on the island of Mabul. Tourists are providing a steady source of income to the region. Mabul is also partly occupied by the Bajau Laut people. Some of them have left their boats to spend more time living here on the beach. These people living next door to the dive resort are among the poorest in the region. The fins of one shark could provide enough money to feed a family for weeks, but the shark sanctuary could take away that income. The Bajau still have to depend on the sea for their survival. Rowan and the other resort operators would like to employ them, but they are here without any official status and not allowed to work.
It's the same situation they've been in for many years. They're nomadic people. The guys you can see behind that are living on the boats still live on the boats. They still travel from island to island. Shark fishing definitely goes on. The one benefit here is the whole shark is consumed. By the law of this particular area, to fish sharks is not illegal. These people have to live, they have to put food on their plates. And even people that are fishing things like rays and sharks, they're still just trying to feed their families. That's all they're trying to do. And, you know, we must understand that. They're part of this area, and they have been for a long time.
On land, Cyprian is also a marine sanctuary for green turtles who come here to lay their eggs. The eggs are collected and brought to the sanctuary.
Yeah, so you can actually tell when they're just about to come up.
So it's that little depression.
That's right, the sand pretty much sort of dents down, drops down.
So this is where it starts. This is where these guys, you know, make their way back. Hatcheries like this, they're just absolutely vital for the future of this species.
It's time for the hatchlings to begin the long and dangerous journey of life.
These guys are hardwired. They just are programmed, head for the lightest thing, and that's usually the horizon, power into the water and swim like that.
As a marine biologist, Mark has been studying the migration of green turtles.
Well, these little guys, you know, the future's pretty uncertain. We don't know where they go. It's a turtle's lost years, the juvenile stage. Years to become adults, you know. Twice the human age of maturity.
During their lives, turtles may travel for thousands of kilometres and cross oceans. But when it's time to reproduce, they return to the place where they were born to mate and lay their eggs. But what happens to turtles when they come to the end of their long lives? Mark makes an interesting discovery in a deep cave at Sipadan.
Well, that dive in the turtle cave was, you know, a really eerie, spooky experience. And in some ways, it's kind of like a metaphor, if you like, for what we're doing to the species. We're driving them down this long, dark tunnel, basically to oblivion. You know, we're pushing them down here with overfishing, with bycatch, with predation on the nesting beaches, with rising temperatures. It's a real worry that in the future, you know, it's entirely possible that the only sea turtles future generations may know are these piles of disarticulated bones in the back of a cave. But there is light at the end of that tunnel if initiatives like the hatchery they have at Sipadan actually come to fruition.
Outside the cave of dead turtles, the carnival of life continues. Each one of these turtles saved from fishermen is vital to the future of this endangered species. But it's not only the turtles and sharks that benefit from the marine reserve. This community of bumphead parrotfish is multiplying here because Sipadan is a reserve.
Absolutely a fantastic sight. And you don't get to see that too many places now. Those fish are a really big target for spear fishermen. And that's a problem. Those fish are actually important engineers within an ecosystem. The coral they're biting off and chewing down on produces a whole lot of sand. In fact, most of the sand on coral reefs, people estimate, comes from fish like that. All over me.
The abundance of Sipadan isn't just a remnant of the past, it's a vision for the future. It's what happens to a coral reef when it's left alone. And the fish will eventually spill over into nearby Mabul. Today, fish are getting harder to find, and the badgeo have to travel a lot further from the shore to get a catch. The canoe has been replaced with a pump boat, so named because it's powered by a pump engine. But it's also fast enough to get the adrenaline pumping. A badgeo fisherman named Sulban is going fishing with Daniel, a young man who's going to marry his niece. They head out beyond the line where the latest of many resorts has been built, to fish in the open waters. The badgeo have been fishing these waters for hundreds of years. They not only have a spiritual connection with the sea, but a physical adaptation that allows them to stay down for a long period without additional weights. Sulban is 20 meters deep and can hold his breath for 5 minutes to find his prey. And he'll need it because there isn't the abundance of big fish like in Sipadan. Years of painful practice help Sulban feel his way through the sharp corals. Not more than a couple of tiny bubbles does Sulban release as he creeps up on his prey. And now Sulban has to find his way back against the current. A few fish to sell would be handy with a wedding on the way. But for all their efforts, Sulban has come up with only one fish. Hardly enough for a meal.
If it was me and I was a poor fisherman sitting in a dinghy and watching a shark swim past, and I knew that that shark, the fins off it, could provide my family with education or maybe healthcare or just food on the table, then man, you know, put yourself in that position, you realise pretty quickly you're going to fish that shark.
But there are no sharks around Mabul because there's little for them to eat. Lydia is tidying up today because tomorrow she's getting married to Daniel. They are planning a great big sea gypsy wedding on the island. Lydia's father is bringing in the morning's catch. Lydia's mother is giving her some last-minute advice about how to keep a fisherman hooked.
Yeah.
Out here, the problem of getting an adequate living from the sea is the problem of the Coral Triangle. A dwindling resource and more mouths to feed. At Nusa Tenggara, a half-day's sailing from Mabul, Daniel's family is gathering. Mark has been invited to the wedding. For him, this is a journey back in time.
I've been working with some of the Bajo in Australia. They're fishing areas in Australia where they're catching shark and trepang, trocus, some of the banquet foods. They've been fishing those reefs in Northern Australia for centuries. The most incredible thing about that house is when we arrived, more and more people came out. And when you'd got 6 or 7 people standing on the balcony there, more came out.
Daniel has some final words as a single man with his father, Alasti, who assures him that as his son, he can always return to the home and live here with his wife.
Nakabilayaan ko, ako na kon tabot na mag-20. Na sa tagol ko alum. Ani ang malamangan namangan luya siya. Na bang iya magma kireta magadale na ipat ko kami mo. Na ani na pag sa mga kami bang imbaltagal kami. Na kalukalo tarua. Na bang baltarua hilang pa in sabdi.
They're decorating the boats for the marriage. Clearly they want kids and another generation to follow in their footsteps. The question is, you know, where are those footsteps leading? It's a really worrying thing. The lifestyle that their grandparents had, it basically doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't exist because too many people are fishing this ocean. I mean, the major thing they're catching here at the moment is plastic. It's very meagre pickings out of that net for a lot of net. Half a kilometre of net, that's a long way. And ratio of plastic to lobsters must be about 300 to 1, I reckon.
After much preparation, the wedding fleet sets off to Mabul for the happy day. As a sustainability expert, Mark is concerned about the future of the young couple in the Coral Triangle.
The waters around here are getting stripped bare. There's not a lot left, and so the problem we see now is coming even bigger in just a few years' time when those kids are adults and have families of their own. We're seeing this right across the Coral Triangle. And it's a problem that Daniel faces. We really need to look at the alternatives of what these people can do around here, because these waters, treated right, could be immensely rich again.
But new opportunities are happening in the Coral Triangle. In Maumere, in Indonesia, Naneng and Valerie visit a fish farming business. It's supported because it uses only sustainable fishing techniques. Fishermen can earn up to 20 times the average price for a fish like this, but only if it's caught without cyanide. This fishery has been set up to supply exotic fish for the lucrative Hong Kong and Beijing markets.
They come here and they inject it with this vitamin C to make them stronger, and they don't accept fish from outside the fishermen group because they suspect it might be caught by cyanide. And then they put it in these holding facilities for about a month, and then someone will take it and bring it to Bali before they export it to Hong Kong.
More dollars for less fish caught legally. And that helps the reef and the fishermen. Another option that Daniel could turn to is seaweed farming, because it provides a higher income compared to fishing. And it's good for the environment, as Lawrence Blair discovers.
Much of Indonesia, of course, is littered in the waters with these plastic bottles, but these people pick up these plastic bottles in this remote, relatively unpopulated region, and they use them to produce the most successful, sustainable maritime aquaculture that we have yet found. And that is growing this agar-agar, or seaweed, which is actually sold to the West and used in pharmaceutical products all over the world. From planting it or putting the little seedlings on this, it takes 1 month to be able to harvest it. Sendiri satu orang berapa kilo sebulan kira-kira bisa dapat?
Sebulan 2 ton.
2 ton? Aduh, sudah orang kaya Bapak kalau begitu. He says he can get 2 tons. So I said he must be a very rich man. Berapa orang yang kerja di sini bersama-sama itu? 2 orang, jangan. 2 orang saja. Dikumpul antara Anda 2 sampai 2 ton sebulan.
1 bulan.
Wow. These 2 gentlemen working together here can pull in 2 tons of dried seaweed every month, which they will sell for, they say, 12,000 rupiah, about $1, a little bit more per kilo. There is a boat that comes here once a month to pick up their agar-agar. Every month there's another harvest. So that's 12 harvests a year.
With tens of thousands of islands throughout the Coral Triangle, most of them uninhabited, and a combined coastline that could wrap around the world 3 times. Who knows what bounty it might provide in the future? New ideas are not only about alternative jobs. As a growing awareness about conservation and new inventions filter down to the fishermen, the endangered species will benefit as well. Turtles live precarious lives if they stray into the fishing zones. An air-breathing reptile like this is doomed unless it can find a way out. The invention of an escape device allows this turtle to live another day. But for Daniel, there's no escape. His wedding is fast approaching.
I'll Why the bajau wedding I don't have smiling? Because this is a bajau style. Serious style.
The future for Daniel and Lydia may be under a cloud. But sometimes, if you are lucky, nature itself will provide an answer.
Yeah, it's a miracle.
We are so thankful that God gave us a good idea how to get some income.
Our journey takes us to the Philippines, where fishermen have created an eco-tourism business with whale sharks. Pictures like this went viral on the internet and have brought tourists in their thousands to Oslo.
Because this is first time happen in the world. Big fish, gentle giant, feeding by a human.
Fishermen have been enticing whale sharks to the beach with krill, and tourists are flocking in to see them. Almost overnight, these poor fishermen became monster shark millionaires in their own currency.
Now, all the fishermen, their house here, a little improvement. And then they have already own electricity. Yeah, they can eat 3 times a day. Last time, only 2 times a day eating. Now, 3 times a day, and then there's a snack also. Some of our fishermen helping each other to buy for medicine, improvement for hospital, improvement for our national road, highway.
Industry here in Oslo is that it involves so many local people. You know, during the weekends, local people, local Filipinos come down and jump in the boats and all go out and swim with whale sharks. It's not just helping the local fishermen, it's actually raising awareness about whale sharks in the local communities as well. That's a great outcome. It's entirely possible that whale sharks could live as many as 150 years. It's quite a thought, and it means that for these long-lived, slow-growing animals, they're very, very susceptible to overfishing, to any predation pressure that humans put on them at all. The Coral Triangle is definitely a dangerous place for whale sharks to come to, and the evidence of that is obvious if you go to somewhere like Hong Kong and walk down a street where they're selling all the shark fin. In many of those shops, you'll see the unmistakable fins of whale sharks.
For the last 8 years, Mark has been studying populations of whale sharks throughout the Coral Triangle.
What I'd like to achieve here in Oslo is take a look at what's going on, and particularly with the provisioning of the sharks. You know, that's a very controversial issue. Lots of people have moral views that we shouldn't be interfering with wild animals in this way. And yet, you know, you can see how and why the fishermen here, why they might be doing that. They point out that they were fishing using the krill as bait, and they were throwing the krill overboard, and they were having a problem with the whale sharks.
And then we cannot caught a fish because whale shark is the one eating our bait. Each whale shark, maybe they can consume 4 or 5 kilos in a half day.
To sustain one of those big whale sharks and feeding on tiny, tiny krill, you know, no bigger than, say, the size of my fingernail, you've got to figure it's going to take an awful lot more than the 8 kilos those guys are throwing overboard. They're really there doing not a lot more than providing the scent of food and just a little hint of it. rather than actually provisioning the sharks or giving them anything really to go on. Jumping in the water and actually looking at the sharks is going to tell me a number of things. It's going to tell me the condition of the sharks. I know what a healthy whale shark should look like. I'm going to be able to see if they're carrying any scars from things like prop damage or from rubbing on the boats. I'm going to be able to see whether or not the shark's behaviour actually looks natural. They're the biggest fish in the world, and they're reputed to grow to 18 metres long, 34 tonnes, if you can imagine it. I mean, occasionally you get one of these big animals, the 10-metre plus things come past you out in the open water. It is quite a sight, believe me. It looks like a bus with fins is coming at you.
Well, if you ever wondered what it's like to be kissed by a whale shark, this is what it's like. Fantastic, man. Look right down its throat. I think it's just happily, really relaxed, just hanging here. Beautiful.
And if you ever watch some of the tourists who actually try and touch the sharks are incredibly sensitive to that. And they do their very best to keep out of your way. They'll come close, but they won't actually touch you. The single most important conservation action you could do today with whale sharks is start up 20 of these operations around the Coral Triangle. And it's an absolute win-win situation. It's a win for the fishermen, it's a win for the whale sharks, and it's also a win for the fish. Because these fishermen aren't going out to the reefs, chucking in nets, throwing over bombs or whatever they need to do to catch fish anymore. They're gainfully employed doing something else. That's a win all round, it's got to be.
So how can the Coral Triangle help the fishermen of the future? Up here on the western extreme of the triangle, at the tip of Malaysia, the reefs have been overfished. Fish from Kudat have been exploited by commercial fishermen for export to world markets. Now, on most of the reefs, there's hardly any big fish left to be seen. Marine biologists from the University of Malaysia in Sabah and the Dutch Naturalis Biodiversity Centre are working on the frontier of the Coral Triangle to claim what is left of the once prolific reef. Marine scientist Zarina Wahid is one of a team making the case for a huge marine park.
It has taken us almost a decade to get to where we are right now. The information that I am gathering from my research, so information on species richness and reefs with rare species and endemic coral species, will hopefully help in the zoning plans for the gazettement of the Tun Mustafa Park.
If it becomes a national marine park, in time rich populations of fish will return to the same abundance as Sipadan, and these in turn will restock the neighbouring fishing grounds. Scientists and divers from around the world are spreading the message about the Coral Triangle. A network of marine reserves is essential to the future. Not just for the fish that spawn there, but for the tropical reefs of all our oceans. Daniel and Lydia's wedding turned out just fine. And today they are setting off for a modern sea gypsy honeymoon and a challenging future in the rapidly changing world of the Coral Triangle. But with new ideas and careful management, it will continue to feed them and provide a good life for their children. It is the desire to protect this powerhouse of nature that brought 6 nations of the region into the Coral Triangle Initiative. A United States of Asia unified in the name of conservation. The challenge is to find a sustainable balance between the environment and the needs of hundreds of millions of people who depend on it. This mother of all tropical reefs has weathered eons of upheaval, culturing the greatest diversity of marine life on the planet. Reefs which show resistance to changing sea temperatures offer a rare ray of hope for a future beyond climate change. According to marine biologist Dr. John Veron, who defined it, the Coral Triangle is going to hold out, and it's tremendously important that it does, because what's holding out is the centre of world marine diversity. Over eons, the Triangle has exported this diversity to the rest of the world. In other words, it's coral's homeland.